Dear SoU, so far in this time capsule, you've heard the voices of many who have either touched or been touched directly by you. Today is going to be a little different. Today you'll hear the words penned by someone who has no idea who you are and has yet shaped so much of who you and I have become. Let me explain. I read a lot, and it's very likely that each book and every author that I've read throughout your lifetime has in some way, big or small, shaped who you've become. And today I want to share with you the wisdom and words of author, feminist, and scholar Bell Hooks. These words, her words, are a sermon that I wish I could gift to every newcomer who I've met over the last 3 years who has berated themselves for their accent, for not being able to speak what is considered standard English. What follows is a compilation of excerpts from Chapter 11 of the book Teaching to Transgress by Bell Hooks. The chapter is called Language, Teaching New Worlds/New Words. She opens the chapter with a quote from Adrienne Rich's poem, The Burning of Paper Instead of Children. The quote is, "This is the oppressor's language, yet I need it to talk to you." She goes on to share, "Standard English is not the speech of exile. It is the language of conquest and domination. In the United States, it is a mask which hides the loss of so many tongues, all those sounds of diverse native communities we will never hear, the speech of Gula, Yiddish, and so many other unremembered groups. Reflecting on Adrienne Rich's words, I know that it is not the English language that hurts me, but what the oppressors do with it. How they shape it to become a territory that limits and defines, how they make it a weapon that can shame, humiliate, colonize." She goes on to imagine the experience of her ancestors' relationship with English. "I imagine them hearing spoken English as the oppressor's language, yet I imagine them also realizing that this language would need to be possessed, taken, claimed as a space of resistance. I imagine the moment they realized the oppressor's language, seized and spoken by the tongues of the colonized, could be a space for bonding, was joyous. For in that recognition was the understanding that intimacy could be restored, that a culture of resistance could be formed that would make recovery from the trauma of enslavement possible. I imagine, then, Africans first hearing English as the quote-unquote oppressor's language, and then rehearing it as a potential site of resistance. Learning English, learning to speak the alien tongue, was one way enslaved Africans began to reclaim their personal power within a context of domination. Possessing a shared language, Black folks could find a way again to make community and a means to create the political solidarity necessary to resist. Needing the oppressor's language to speak with one another, they nevertheless also remade that language so that it could speak beyond the boundaries of conquest and domination. In the mouths of Black Africans in the so-called New World, English was altered, transformed, and became a different speech. Enslaved Black people took broken bits of English and made of them a counter-language. They put together their words in such a way that the colonizer had to rethink the meaning of English language. Though it has become common in contemporary culture to talk about the messages of resistance that emerged in the music created by slaves, particularly spirituals, less is said about the grammatical construction of sentences in these songs. Often, the English used in the song reflected the broken, ruptured world of the slave. When the slave sang, quote, "Nobody knows the trouble I see," end quote, their use of the word nobody adds a richer meaning than if they had used the phrase no one, for it was the slave's body that was a concrete site of suffering, and even as the emancipated Black people sang spirituals, they did not change the language, the sentence structure of our ancestors. For in the incorrect usage of words, in the incorrect placement of words, was a spirit of rebellion that claimed language as a site of resistance. Using English in a way that ruptured standard usage and meaning so that white folks could not understand black speech made English into more than the oppressor's language. Using the vernacular means that translation into standard English may be needed if one wishes to reach a more inclusive audience. In the classroom setting, I encourage students to use their first language and translate it so they do not feel like seeking higher education will necessarily estrange them from the language and culture they know most intimately. Not surprisingly, when students in my Black women writers class begin to speak using diverse language and speech, white students often complained. This seemed to be particularly the case with Black vernacular. It was particularly disturbing to the white students because they could hear the words that were said, but could not comprehend their meaning. Pedagogically, I encourage them to think of the moment of not understanding what someone says as a place to learn. Such a space provides not only the opportunity to listen without quote-unquote mastery, without owning or possessing speech through interpretation, but also the experience of hearing non-English words. These lessons seem particularly crucial in a multicultural society that remains white supremacist, that uses standard English as a weapon to silence and censor. Recent discussions of diversity and multiculturalism tend to downplay or ignore the question of language. At a lecture where I might use Southern Black vernacular, the particular patois of my region, or where I might use very abstract thought in conjunction with plain speech, responding to a diverse audience, I suggest that we do not necessarily need to hear and know what is stated in its entirety, that we do not need to quote-unquote master or conquer the narrative as a whole, that we may know it in fragments. I suggest that we may learn from spaces of silence as well as spaces of speech, that in the patient act of listening to another tongue, we may subvert the culture of capitalist frenzy and consumption that demands all desire must be satisfied immediately. Or we may disrupt that cultural imperialism that suggests one is worthy of being heard only if one speaks in standard English. When I need to say words that do more than simply mirror or address the dominant reality, I speak Black vernacular. There, in that location, we make English do what we want it to do. We take the oppressor's language and turn it against itself. We make our words a counter-hegemonic speech, liberating ourselves in language. I know, I was left speechless too. So, SoU, I hope you'll join me in thanking Bell Hooks. The work that she has and continues to do in rewriting her individual as well as our collective histories paves the way for futures in which so many of our storytellers don't have to struggle to exist as they are. Futures where they don't have to feel embarrassed or feel lesser than when speaking in the ways that their tongues desire.